because we're reading just before Isaiah 53, this is Isaiah 52 and verse 10, that it be made bare before all the nations, so that all the nations would see. And somebody was preaching recently, and they thought that Jesus had been crucified through his wrist, which would be part of his arm. There is an argument now with scientists that the hand could not bear the weight on the cross. So when the Bible says about his holy arm and his hand being pierced, we have to come against these ideas which have now infiltrated all the pulpits, that Jesus was crucified through the wrist because the hand can't bear the weight. But I read in my Bible that Jesus, when he was crucified on the cross, that none of his bones were broken. And the thieves next to Jesus on the cross, their legs were broken. Yeah. So that the hand was not bearing the weight, but the leg bore the weight. And it says that he was to have his heel bruised in Genesis chapter 3. So Jesus, although his heel has been bruised, it wasn't pierced, I believe, through the bone. It was underneath. So I had a look at some recent pictures on the internet where they found some pierced ankles. The nail goes underneath the heel, so that the weight, and they had a metal plate holding the. So when they said to Jesus, "Can you come down from the cross? We'll believe on you." It was impossible humanly because they used to bend the nails as well, to pull your body off the cross. But the weight was not on the hands, but on the legs. So I had to correct the pastor because I don't know why this teaching is getting in everywhere. They seem to be Googling the gospel as well. It's a strange thing. It says in the word gyneco, we get the word gynecology as well, to women in the hospital, for the women's department, and so when the word is mentioned in the Bible, it's always penthera. I think 3,964 or 94 times, I think, the word woman or wife. It's the same word, penthera. But you won't see it if you Google it. It'll come up under the Latin. So the point is, what I'm trying to say is that when we Google everything about the gospel, there is a problem. We need to come back to the word instead of Googling everything, because Google's now going to be misguiding and misleading pastors. It's sad to hear that from the pulpit. Jesus was crucified through his hands and his feet. The Hebrew word is yad. Bayad, Moshe. By the hand of Moses is one verse in the Bible. There's another verse which talks about yadaiv, which is plural for hands. And that's in Psalm 22, verse 16. They shall pierce my hands and my feet. They pierce my hands and my feet, which is yadaiv, vereblive. And sad, they take that verse out of the Jewish translation. It's in the Bible. Why haven't they translated? Yadaiv, vereblive. They pierce my hands and my feet. Why is it not translated yet? It's in the Hebrew. So you can read the word there. If you look at the Hebrew Bible, it's yad. Yeah, it's got the symbols for yad. So you got there, yadaiv, the plural. So this is what I'm trying to say is we can't go Googling everything and relying on Google. So when it says in my Bible, penthera, which means in the Greek, if you look at it, the Greek translation, penthera means that Peter, like Peter's wife's mother, lay sick of the fever. But it's an important thing, because if you Google it, it says mother-in-law. But mother-in-law isn't the same word for wife. And in the Greek, it's penthera. It's in our Bibles. So they've actually bypassed the word, because they're all Googling it now, and it's all coming up as mother-in-law, mother-in-law, mother-in-law. Everything is mother-in-law. No, it's wife. That's the proper Greek word, penthera, and it's mentioned 3,994 times in the Bible. It's either wife or woman, penthera. Gyneco is the Latin. Our Bibles are based on the Greek, not on the Latin. So it's sad when people, pastors, are going to be quoting from just Googling everything and just coming out with it, and they're not thinking. And they now, piercing through the wrist. You can't do that. They bleed to death too quickly and stuff. So it's making a mockery of the gospel. And the Bible says they pierced my hands, not my arm. There's a different Hebrew word for the arm as for the hand. So it doesn't say Jesus would ever be pierced through his wrist or his arm, that part of the body. So when the Bible teaches us, the wonderful good news that we're saved by God's holy arm, which is made bare before all the nations. This is Isaiah now, 52. And we go to 53, the next chapter. It says, he shall grow up before him as a tender plant, and as a root out of dry ground. He has no form or comeliness. This is Jesus. He's not coming as some superhero, some great, warrior, like in the Bible, Saul. Saul was, head and shoulders above everybody. And he became the king of Israel. But God says, no, I want a man after my own heart. Because God doesn't look on the outside. God looks on the heart. And so David was God's choice. But Saul was the people's choice. And the people wanted to have a king. They didn't want to have God raising up wonderful deliverers, which was in the Old Testament you read about the judges. And you got Samson. Marvelous, okay, he wasn't the perfect Christian character, but he was God's man to deliver the Jews in battles when they were being oppressed. I think it was 2,400 or something, at least we know, of which were killed, and they were all top enemies of the Israeli people. And God had to police the people, because when they became too strong, when Israel repented, they had to have deliverers when they called on God, which is what they did. And God sent them deliverers. God sent them these judges. And when Samuel was asked by the people, we don't want you anymore. We don't want judges anymore. We want a king. God was unhappy about that, because God raised the deliverers. When the people repented, God raised the deliverers every time. And so, you have to give 10%. 10% of your children, 10% of your money, 10% of everything has got to go to this king. Plus, you're going to be paying your tithes to the work of God. And this is what I'm trying to say is that, anyway, go back to where God says that in chapter 53, that he says, all we like sheep, we're gone astray. We have turned everyone to his own way. And the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. And I think it's verse 5 in Isaiah 53. And I can't remember the Hebrew word now, but it's Miadesha Enu, I think, which is basically telling us there that Jesus would be crucified. And that is describing the crucifixion there in verse 5, that Isaiah 53. And it goes on then to say that he made his death with the wicked and with the righteous. But the thing is with the rich, God, it says in verse 10 or 12, Isaiah 53, he made his grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death. And Jesus on the cross, he was taken down by a rich man. And he was buried in a rich man's grave in a tomb. And also the scriptures describe in Psalm 22, they pierce my hands and my feet. And then verse 18, 2 verses later, it says they part my garments among them and cast lots on my vesture. So this is the gospel in the Old Testament. And in actually verse 1, it's Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, my God, why have you forsaken me? And the scriptures is showing us there that Jesus would have probably quoted this psalm when he was on the cross. It's so similar to what he did on the cross. And he came to fulfill all the scriptures for us. And when it says that one of his bones shall be broken, that's what happened on the cross. His bones were not broken. None of his bones were broken, but all the others had their bones broken. And we remember the time, it was at noon that he was on the cross, which would be 12 arm of God being made bare.